Connecting WordPress and Microsoft 365 Azure AD is super easy. Hi, I'm Marco, and in today's video I want to show you how an existing author of a WordPress website can sign into this WordPress website using his Microsoft Azure AD account instead of using a separate set of WordPress credentials, username and password. So let's get started. For today's video I created a new website, test1.wpo365.com. And as you can see, I've not installed anything special. It's an out-of-the-box theme, and to log in I must enter a username and password. I will do that, and I will do that as an administrator. And once I'm logged in, you can also see that the website has really only one user, that's me, the administrator. And I will create a new user who will be an author for this beautiful website that we are creating. I will call the user John Demo, and he will have an email address, and that is demo@wpo365.com. I will give him a first name, it's John, last name, it's Demo. Basically I think that is enough for the moment, and we have a very difficult password. Of course, we want the passwords to be strong. We don't want him to send an email about his log at this moment, and I will add the user as an author. So I will add the user, and what I want to achieve now is that this user, this author of my beautiful website, is able to sign in with his corporate account, with his demo@wpo365.com account, which is also his username. It's his email address, but also the username. And as you can see, I created the user. I used a very short username, but the email address that I created is the same email address that has been registered for this user in Azure AD. So to allow this user to sign in, I would need to first of all install the plugin WPO365 login. So I go to plugins and I click add new. I search for WPO365, and here you'll see that there is the WordPress plus Microsoft Office 365 Azure AD login plugin. There's more than 5,000 installations at the moment, and this will be the next one. I click to install, and once installed I click to activate the plugin. Before I continue, I have a very important question to you. Can you please subscribe to my channel and like the video? That's really important for others, so that they know that this video and content in my channel in YouTube is worth watching. Thanks! Getting started with the WPO365 plugin is actually really easy. I activated the plugin, and immediately afterwards in my WP admin I will find this banner. And it provides me with a couple, I hope, useful links. Two of them are about single sign-on. Why two? Well, because basically you have a choice. You can choose between OpenID Connect and SAML 2.0 based single sign-on. What's the difference? Well, I don't want to explain all of that in this video, but if you're interested, you can click and follow the SAML 2.0 link, and it will take you to the SAML 2.0 documentation, and here you can read about the differences between SAML 2.0 and OpenID Connect based single sign-on. For the video for today, I will configure OpenID Connect based single sign-on. The single sign-on configuration guide explains all the steps needed to configure Microsoft based single sign-on. At the highest level possible, these steps are that we register our WordPress website in Azure AD as a web application. And then we need to configure something called the ID token. Each time a user wants to sign in to your WordPress website, the plugin will redirect the user to Microsoft to authenticate. And if the user authenticates successfully, Microsoft, or actually Azure AD, will send an ID token back to the website. And this ID token contains essential information, but a minimal set of essential information about the user. An email address, maybe family name, a user login name. It needs to be enough information for the plugin to be able to find a user, a matching WordPress user, by login name, by email address. We need also to configure, basically to tell Azure AD that if this application connects to Azure AD, and if it requests an action, then we need to say what it is allowed to do. So we need to configure the permissions. We need to tell Azure AD that it's okay if we request an ID token or if we request a user's email address. We also need to grant permission as an administrator on behalf of all the users. If we don't do that, each and every user will be asked to consent to this application sending data about that user back to the website. And we don't want that. We want that one time as an administrator, but not for each individual user. And then last but not least, we also need to configure, I would say, a secret. It's kind of a password. Each time when the plugin on behalf of the user connects to Azure AD to request basically an ID token and forces the user to authenticate, it will do so by identifying itself. And it identifies itself by using the application ID, and you can think of that as a username. And of course, with the username also goes a password. And that's the secret that we configure here. As soon as we have finished with the registration of our web application in Azure AD, there's only one thing left to do, and that is that we copy a few of the most important identifiers over from Azure AD to our WPO365 plugin configuration. So, enough talking, let's get started. To get started, I will navigate to portalazure.com, and as soon as I'm logged in, I will go to Azure Active Directory, and I go to the app registrations, and I click to register a new application. I give it a useful name. Let's say we call it WordPress video, but I'm quite sure that you come up with better names. And as support account types, I just say accounts in this organizational directory are allowed to sign into my WordPress website. You have other options for multi-tenancy, and there will be other videos that go into detail how you can support users from other tenants signing into your WordPress web application. But for today, we restrict ourselves to users from our own tenant, from our own organization. Then I scroll down a little bit and I want to register a web application, a WordPress web application. So I select web as the application platform, and then I need to enter a URL, a redirect URL. And in this case, I really recommend that we quickly switch back to the plugin, and we basically go to the WPO365 configuration. We continue to the single sign-on page, and here you'll see that the plugin already proposes a redirect URI to you. And this URL should be basically the homepage URL of your website. And if I paste it here, Microsoft will tell us that it's okay. It would not be okay if you're not using HTTPS, then you would get an error. So I'm registering the web application with this address, and I click to register our application in Azure AD. That's already an important step out of the way. So if I remembered correctly, next up is the ID token configuration. So I click token configuration, and I add a couple of optional ID token claims. For instance, email address, family name, given name, and UPN. That's the UPN is the user principal name. It's the login name in Azure AD of a user. So I click add, and it also immediately asks me whether it shall already add a couple of permissions. I say, yeah, that's okay. Do that, please. Thank you. And I click to add the optional claims to the ID token, and as well as updating the permissions. Next are the permissions. So I click API permissions, and I can see already the permissions that Azure AD has added automatically during the previous step when we configured the ID token, the email and profile permissions, but I need more. So I click add a permission, I select Microsoft Graph, delegate permissions, and I add at least OpenID, and that allows us to basically implement single sign-on using the OpenID Connect user flow. And as a matter of habit, I also select open offline access. This basically tells Azure AD to also give us a refresh token whenever we request an access token. We don't need that at this moment in time, but if we going to implement, if we were going to implement more advanced scenarios where we want to retrieve maybe all the Azure AD groups that the user is a member of, or if we want to retrieve additional user profile fields or custom Azure AD attributes, if we want to call it that way, then we definitely need that. So as a matter of habit, I just always add it. I click add permissions, and once I've added those, I need to grant admin consent, and I can do that by clicking yes. And by clicking grant admin consent, I basically consent on behalf of all the users. I explained that already before, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. Two things are probably important at this point. If this button, grant admin consent, appears to be grayed out, then it means you don't have sufficient rights within Azure AD to grant those permissions, to grant consent. In that case, you have to really ask a global administrator to click this button on your behalf. And the other thing that I want to mention here is that even if everything seems okay, and everywhere for each permission you see a green icon telling you that it has been granted, I would still recommend that you click the button and grant it again, just in case. Well, I think we have one thing left, and that is to create a secret, a client secret. So I continue to the certificates and secret page. Here I click to create a new client secret. I can enter a description, but you can also leave it empty, and I can configure when the secret should expire. So for how long should it be valid? So the default is 6 months. Whatever value that you choose here, important is that you need to realize that after 6 months, the secret is expired and can't be used anymore. So you have then to come back to your app registration in Azure AD and create a new client secret, just the way that I will show you now, and replace the client secret that we copy, the value of this client secret, that we copy over to the WPO365 plugin configuration. So let's first of all add a new client secret. You can see Microsoft proposed a default description, and I can see part of the value here. Important is that once you navigate away from this page, you won't see the value again. So it's important that you copy that value immediately, and maybe you paste it into a notepad for the moment, or you immediately save it into some password management system. What I normally do, to be honest, is that I already quickly switch back to my WPO365 plugin configuration, and here I have a field client secret. It's on the single sign-on page. There you'll find the client secret field, and I paste my secret here immediately. That way it won't get lost, and that's where it needs to go anyway. So I quickly go back to my Azure AD app registration, the client secret that I just created. There's one important thing that I want to mention here, is that you need to copy the value. Many people have copied the secret ID in the past, and that's the wrong value. We don't need the secret ID. We do need the value of this client secret. Well, basically we're done. And if I remember correctly from what I said in the beginning, we need now to copy over a few important identifiers to the plugin's configuration. So I go back to the overview page of my app registration, and here I will need to copy the application client ID, and I can simply click the icon and it's copied to my clipboard, and I switch back to the WPO365 configuration, and here I see the field application client ID, and I paste the ID that I just copied. There's another field that I need to fill out, that's the directory tenant ID. I can switch back to my app registration, and here I can also find the directory tenant ID. I copy it and I paste this also here, and basically I'm done. Basically I'm set up for single sign-on. You may have noticed that I have not changed the configuration of the first 3 fields in the section Azure Active Directory. And that is because the default selection here is sufficient for what we want to achieve. And what we want to achieve, to remember you, is that we want to configure our website, our WordPress website, to be enabled for Microsoft-based single sign-on using the OpenID Connect user flow. So if I look at the first field, I can select an identity provider. The WPO365 plugin basically supports only one identity provider, but that identity provider, Microsoft Azure AD, comes in two flavors. There's the default Azure AD directory, probably the one that you use for your company, and there is Azure AD B2C. If you don't know what Azure AD B2C is, then you're anyway good to go with Azure AD. If you do know what Azure AD B2C is and you want to configure Azure AD B2C, then this is not your video. Basically, this video is not for you. And you can click the information link here to basically find the guide that will help you to implement, to configure the WPO365 plugin to allow single sign-on for users from Azure AD B2C. The second field is about what single sign-on protocol do we need, do we want to configure. And as I said in the beginning of this video, we will go with OpenID Connect. The alternative would be, as you already guessed, SAML 2.0. Again, as I said in the beginning, there will be another video about this, so we leave this also at OpenID Connect. And then, last but not least, you can basically select the flow, the OpenID Connect flow, the user flow. And by default, and this is new since version 18 of the WPO365 plugin, the default flow is authorization code flow. The alternative is the hybrid flow, and why we recommend the authorization code flow starting from version 18. You can read all about that if you click again the information icon. Why the authorization code flow is now recommended. Well, I would say that we can leave the rest of the configuration for the moment as it is in its default settings, and I just simply click to save the configuration. When I save the configuration, I'll get a notification that it's recommended to purge any server-side cache. If you have any server-side cache, I would even say at this point in time, disable it whilst you are implementing single sign-on, and enable it again once it's working. As soon as I hit confirm, I am taken automatically to the plugin's self-test. I can also see that the initial banner is gone. So the plugin recognized, hey, there is a minimal configuration available. So there is no more help shown to you that you need to, how you can continue and configure the plugin. However, if you do need to return to the documentation repository, I recommend that you have a look at the support toolbar here, and here you find a link for documentation, and if you click that, you'll be taken to the docs.wpo365.com website, and here you'll find all the getting started documentation, but also advanced topics, information for developer support and plugin configuration. Having said that, we are now at the plugin self-test page, and the plugin self-test performs a system test and tells us whether the plugin is configured okay and whether the most important vital functions of the integration with Azure AD are working as expected. So let's sign out of Microsoft. So I can simply go back to my Azure web browser tab here. I can click sign out, and I sign my account out, and I'm signed out. Close all the browsers. I close this, and if I now go to the plugin self-test and I say start self-test, you can see that I'm taken to Microsoft, and now I am asked to select an account that I want to use for testing. Well, I just take my administrator account, Marco at WPO365.com, and now the test complete, and I can scroll down and to see how the test went, basically. I can see that the application has received an ID token. I can actually also look at the ID token, at the information that Microsoft sent us. And here you see some technical details and some essential fields that we actually requested: family name, given name, email address, UPN. I can close that and I can continue to scroll, and well, I'm mostly interested in tests that didn't pass. So here I see there is something called custom domain names and they are not configured, and I can configure them on the user registration page. So let's do that. And if I scroll all the way up, I find here indeed a field, custom domain names, and the plugin would like me to enter here a couple of domains. The domains that the plugin is really interested in for a couple of its functions are the domains that your users may use when they sign in to the website. I can click here the link, view custom domain names, and this takes me to Azure Portal, and it takes me basically to Azure Active Directory and to the page with the custom domain names. Well, my users can actually sign in with WPO365.com, or the default users in the tenant would have would basically have the domain user at WPO365demo.onmicrosoft.com. So I'm gonna add both here. So I would say it's this domain, and I add it, and I'm gonna add WPO365.com, and I'm gonna add it. Make sure to always click the plus, it sometimes goes forgotten. And I scroll all the way down and I save this configuration. And I can actually now simply go back to the plugin self-test and run it one more time. So that went really fast. I would say it's a big compliment for AWS and their light sail product, and how quickly the Bitnami WordPress instance is running there. It's really wow. That is it's a pleasure to work with. Well, as you can see, actually all the tests have basically passed. Everything is green, there were no errors. I can just see here there are advanced scenarios to retrieve additional user profile fields, but the test didn't pass because we don't have an extension installed. The same is true that the plugin was not able to retrieve additional user information, Azure AD groups that the user is a member of, because we have nothing installed that would need this. Same is true for the avatar, the user profile picture, user synchronization, Azure AD user provisioning using the SCIM interface, sending mail. We not enabled that and we leave it as it is for the moment. We didn't configure any integration with SharePoint or OneDrive or similar. So, by the looks of it, it looks as if our website is now ready for users from Microsoft Azure Directory to sign in. And as I said at the beginning, this video is all about that I want my users who are authors of the website to sign in using their corporate account. And I created the user. If you may remember, this user was John Demo, and his email address is demo@WPO365.com. And yeah, I want to basically test it with John Demo to see whether he can actually sign into the website using Microsoft 365 using his Azure AD account. To sign in as John Demo, I would simply take a new fresh browser with an own browser profile, and I will visit the website test1 WPO365.com. And obviously this is just an ordinary website, so I would really need to go to the login page to log in. Well, the login page has changed a little bit because we activated the plugin and we configured it. I can now log in with Microsoft. There is a new button, sign in with Microsoft, and I click it and I am taken to Microsoft, login.microsoftonline.com, and I can select my account and I need to enter a password, which I'm doing, of course. And since this account has also MFA, so multi-factor authentication, enabled, I would need to go to my phone and to approve this sign-in. And as soon as I have approved the sign-in, you can see it continues. I can choose whether I want to stay signed in. I say yes. And now I am logged in to the website. So what's next? Well, I think you will do a little bit more of testing. And if you have a question or if you are stuck, then you'll find a blue dot with a question mark in the right bottom corner of the WPO365 configuration pages. And if you click it, you'll see a beacon and you can send a request for support. And you may expect an answer within 24 hours, normally a bit quicker, unless it's the weekend, of course. You may also remember that I asked you to subscribe to our video channel and to like the video. So please do. And whilst you're at it, please leave a review in the WordPress plugin directory. That's really much appreciated as well. And last but not least, visit our website, WPO365.com. You'll find a comprehensive overview of all the possible features and extensions, plugins that would basically extend the functionality of the core WPO365 login plugin. There are options to synchronize users, to enable single sign-on for the default login page, to enhance a user's profile with first name, last name, email address, to support multi-tenancy, to send emails using Microsoft Graph, to restrict access based on a user's membership of Azure AD groups. There's loads of it. Please have a look at the website, and if you have a question, then please don't hesitate and get in touch. You can also use the contact form on the website. Thank you for watching this video, and good luck integrating your WordPress website with Microsoft 365 and Azure AD.